You get to throw things. You get to throw things. You need water guns.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the greatest NZ live political podcast in the world, The Working Group. Hosted by beloved left-wing broadcaster Comrade Bomber Bradbury, with the best political panel in New Zealand media, reviewing the week, setting the agenda, avoiding defamation. The Working Group is brought to you by Gravity Credit Management. When the weight of capitalism is becoming the event horizon of an imploding black hole, call 0800 Gravity, and our team will get blood out of a stone. That's 0800 Gravity. This is The Working Group.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Kia ora Aotearoa, this is the Taxpayers Union 2023 election debate series coming live from the palatial Roxy's at Imperial House in the mighty Auckland Central. Hosted by the Working Group, New Zealand's best weekly political podcast that isn't funded by New Zealand On Air. I am your host for this evening, editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury, and joining me tonight is my podcast permanent panellist, the 132nd most important libertarian columnist at Stuff, Damien Grant. We're streaming live tonight on the daily blog, the Taxpayers Union, Facebook and YouTube, and simulcast on Juice TV, Freeview 200. Brothers and sisters, fellow New Zealanders, comrades and citizens, thank you for tuning into this most important of civic duties, which is to vote. In an age of disinformation, misinformation and apathy, our democracy needs engaged citizens like never before. Let's ensure that tonight we are passionate in our debate and righteous in our argument, because there are only 100 democracies on earth and we are blessed to be one of them. Tonight we will debate the ideas while respecting the individual, because no matter how you vote, we are all citizens and we all shake hands after the arguing. So before we begin, a toast, fellow citizens, to our democracy, and long may we debate it. To democracy! Right, let's get into the buggers. Tonight we will probe each candidate on issues that are confronting this electorate and the nation. We aren't just interested in their promise to Auckland Central, we are interested in how they will provide leadership on the big issues confronting New Zealand. And right now from the poll, the biggest issues are Issue 1, crime, Issue 2, public transport, Issue 3, housing and the cost of living. At the end of the debate, I will ask where we are going as a country, and each candidate will get 60 seconds to answer where they think the country is going and how voting for them and their party will impact that direction. I have to warn all four candidates now that I have an allergic reaction to party spin lines, and if I hear vacant answers to important questions, I shall not hesitate in being sarcastic. You won't like me when I'm sarcastic. After I have quizzed you on each of these topics, Damien will challenge your answers and you will get a 30-second rebuttal to him. The reason you have 30 seconds to rebut Damien is because no one should ever have to answer a libertarian for more than 30 seconds. Before we begin, our candidates, before we introduce our candidates and invite them to give us their opening statements, I'd like to invite Callum from the Taxpayers Union to come to the stage and present us with the courier polling for Auckland Central. Ladies and gentlemen, Callum.
I'm just waiting to be counted in.
Go. Go for it.
Okay, thank you, Martyn. Before we start, a little bit of background about the Auckland Central electorate. Between 1919 and 2008, Auckland Central has almost exclusively been represented by Labour MPs, save for a single term when Alliance MP Sandra Lee won the seat in 1993. In 2008, however, as John Quay became Prime Minister, Nikki Quay took the seat for National and held it until she retired at the 2020 election. At that most recent election, the seat was won for the first time by Chloe Swarbrick for the Greens when she became only the second Green MP to represent an electorate seat. And today's poll will give us an insight into how likely she is to hold on to that seat. So let's get into it. This poll was conducted for the Taxpayers Union by Courier Market Research on Sunday the 24th of September this year. 500 respondents agreed to participate from a random sample of 5,000 phone numbers for adults living in the Auckland Central electorate. Now let's start by looking at country direction, which is a very good measure of telling us how people are feeling, whether they're feeling positive or not about the future of New Zealand. Here in Auckland Central, 74% of people said New Zealand was headed in the wrong direction. 18%, sorry, that should say 62, it does say 62. 25% said it was headed in the right direction, and 13% said said they were unsure. This is almost exactly the same when we get a net score of minus 37% to our most recent nationwide Taxpayers Union Courier poll, where the net country direction score was minus 36%. We also asked people in the Auckland Central electorate what was the most important local issue to them. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given some of the recent terrible events here in this electorate, the top issue was law and order on 33%. 11% of voters were unsure. 10% thought public transport was the top issue, followed by 9% for housing and also 9% for the cost of living. And others cumulatively were on 8%. 6% thought climate change and flooding was the most important issue, 5% for the economy, 3% for roading, 2 each for the local council, 3 voters and education, and 1 for health. Now moving on to party vote, the vote that mostly determines the overall shape and composition of Parliament. If we start by looking at all voters, National are in the lead on 30%, Labour on 21%, the Greens on 19%, ACT on 7%, New Zealand First on 3%. 17% of voters were unsure and 2 refused to give us an answer. Now, it's up to them. Now, for the decided vote, we remove those who were unsure or refused to get the most close approximation to what we would see on the night. So for National, that was 37%, which is up 16 points on the last election. Labour on 26, which is down 20 points. The Greens on 23, which is up 4 points. ACT on 9%, up 1. And New Zealand First on 4, up 2. That's a 2-party swing from Labour to National of 18 points. We also asked about name recognition for the electorate MP and the other top 2 candidates, National and Labour, for the electorate. So for Chloe Swarbrick, the incumbent MP, 40% of people correctly identified her, 56% were not able to identify her, and 3% tried to but got it wrong. For Mahesh, the National candidate, 26% were correct in identifying him, 73% couldn't identify him, and 1% got it wrong. For Oscar, Labour candidate, 10% correctly identified him. Oh, sorry, we lost the visual. It's back. 86% couldn't identify him, 4% got it wrong. Now, this is lower for all candidates than we've seen in other seats, which could perhaps be put down to more transient nature of voters in the Auckland Central electorate. Now, for seats where we have an incumbent MP, we also asked how people rated the performance of their MP over the last year. So in this case, Chloe Swarbrick. So 9% of people said her performance was very poor, 12% said poor, 17% said it was average, 16% said good, 20% said very good, and 26% were unsure. Now, if we add the very poor and poor together and take that from good and very good, we get a net MP approval rating, and in this case it is positive 15%. That is significantly better than the two Labour MPs for whom we've asked this same question, who had scores of minus 15% and minus 36% respectively. So it's a good score. Now we move on to the main event, the main contest that we're here to hear from the candidates this evening. So that's the electorate vote for Auckland Central. Again, looking at all voters, starting with Chloe Swarbrick out in the lead on 26% for the Greens. Mahesh close behind on 24% for National. Oscar Sims for Labour on 12%. New Zealand First did have a candidate, but my understanding is they no longer have a candidate here, so there's 3%, but they can't vote for them. Now, we have Felix for ACT on 1%. Te Pāti Māori, who also don't have a candidate, on 1%. Others on 1%. Unsure on 29%. So 3 in 10 voters undecided. And 3% again not playing ball and refuse to tell us which way they plan to vote. Now, if we do the same to remove the unsure and the refuse to get a decided voter score, that has Chloe on 38%, which is up 3 on the last election. Mahesh on 36%, which is up 9. Oscar on 17%, which is down 15 points. New Zealand First, subject to that caveat, on 4%. Felix on 2%. Te Pāti Māori, again, don't have a candidate, but on 1%, and others on 2%, which is a two-party swing from the Greens this time to National of 3 points. So what was once a three-way contest in 2020 now looks to be a two-horse race between Chloe and Mahesh. This is a statistical tie, with the difference between the two candidates being within the margin of error for our poll. However, Chloe does seem to have an advantage here in that there are more voters committed to centre-left parties to squeeze than there are on the centre-right. But I would draw your attention again to that very large number of undecided voters, almost 3 in 10. This contest still could go either way. Thank you.
Party vote 2020 was Labour 46, National 21, Greens 19, Act 8. Party vote from that poll, Labour 26, National 37, Act 9 and Greens 23. Labour just reached toxic ex-boyfriend level with the voters in Auckland Central. Let us begin tonight's events by introducing our invited candidates to this evening's live-streamed simulcast TV debate. Mahesh from the National Party. Oscar from the Labour Party. Felix from the ACT Party. And Chloe from the Greens. That's what I want to hear. Welcome to you all. Let's begin tonight with an opening 1 minute from each of you on your vision for Auckland Central and New Zealand. Mahesh, your 1 minute vision for Auckland Central starts now.
Good evening. Good evening. My name's Mahesh, and I'm standing in front of you to be your Auckland Central MP because I love this community and I want to make it one of the best places to live and one of the best places to work in the world. We deserve that. You deserve that. We need to fix the crime wave sweeping through our city. We need to sort out our transport, not spend another $120 million of your money on projects that go nowhere. And we need to get our economy pumping with more jobs, better pay, and lower cost of living for all Kiwis. I will deliver for Auckland Central. I have over 20 years of global experience in solving complex problems and delivering value for people. I'll advocate for an additional police station to keep our community safe. I'll work with the community and council on better housing and transport solutions. And as part of the National Party, I'll help create a modern tech hub that delivers more opportunities for our students and for our grads. I will get the job done. Enough with the excuses. As a National Party member of Parliament in a national-led government, we will get our amazing community and country back on track.
Thank you, Mahesh. if you want to pass the mic along. Oscar, your 1 minute vision for Auckland Central and New Zealand, please. Your time starts now.
Well, it sounds like there's about a 19-point gap between the left and the right in the candidate vote in this electorate, so I think a progressive candidate is going to win. But let me give you my vision for the candidate vote and the country. Look, I want to make Auckland the most livable city in the world, and that means better transport, that means more housing, that means a system and a lower crime that works for everyone, right? So that means effective action on law and order, not just sloganeering. That means protecting the rights of the thousands of renters here in Auckland Central. That means protecting the environment, including strong action on climate change, but also action on protecting the Gulf, as the Labour government has already undertaken, and a fairer deal on public transport, lower costs, higher reliability, and a better deal for ferry users on Waiheke. My vision for the country is a vibrant and thriving democracy, a country where we have a sensible and costed plan to take on the cost of living, and where we have effective action on climate change, where we're not kicking down the can for the most important issue facing our generation.
Thank you, Oster. Felix, your 1 minute vision for Auckland Central and New Zealand, please. Your time starts now.
Is the mic on? Awesome. I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here tonight. It's so great to see so many people turning up on a Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to partake in our democracy. I'm sure you have better things to do, but it's great to see you all here now.
Damien doesn't. Damien has nothing better to do. This is it.
I'll just say I'm a big fan of the working group as well. It's one of my favourite podcasts. Highly recommend. But before I get into my political spiel, I just want to ask, who here watched the leaders debate the other week? Oh yeah, that's most of you. Well, I did as well, and honestly, I was pretty disappointed by what I saw because I didn't see a lot of vision, and to be honest, it was pretty boring. If this election is just about picking one Chris, then I think we've got serious problems because New Zealand has serious problems right now. We've got a cost of living crisis, which is out of control. We've got crime, which is also out of control, and people are really suffering. And those issues have come from an even bigger issue, which is the productivity crisis in this country. Any government going forward needs to address the productivity crisis in this country, and if we can address that, we can get a better New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Chloe, your 1 minute vision for Auckland Central and New Zealand, please. Your time starts now.
It's been the honour and privilege of my life over the past 3 years to represent my home and community of Auckland Central, but I think as all of us know, we've been confronted by relentless challenges, and I have been incredibly proud of how our community has consistently organised, mobilised and risen to those challenges across those who live in our communities, and I need to also acknowledge Vivek, who I can see here from out of the city, our businesses and our business associations. In the face of COVID-19, for example, we organised and we saw more than 60 local businesses sign an open letter which saw the extension of small business support. We also saw the government respond in a way that it for so long had told us was completely impossible, whether it was the likes of rent freezes, direct payments to people who needed them, or flexible working arrangements for sole parents, people with disabilities or otherwise. What that demonstrated to all of us is that all of these things that we have been told for so long are impossible. To have a far more equitable society and one that takes climate action are simply a matter of political willpower. And I think that I have demonstrated amply time and again that you know where I stand on the really critical issues facing our city and facing our country, and I will fight tooth and nail to ensure that we put Auckland Central on the map and that we have everything that we need to succeed. Thank you.
Preach. Thank you, candidates. Let's start with the main issue Auckland Central voters are concerned about, and it is crime. Post-COVID, New Zealand has been terrified by ram-raiding youth and 501 syndicates starting turf wars for the meth trade. To date, the sophistication of the debate has been ACT wanting ankle bracelets on 11-year-olds, National wanting them on 10-year-olds, or Labour wants them on 12-year-olds. It costs $200,000 per year to keep a prisoner in prison, and ACT are promising $1 billion more on prisons. National will ban all gang patches in public. Labour promises wraparound services, while the Greens are demanding more rehabilitation. Candidates, you have 60 seconds to answer each of my questions, followed by a question from Damien based on your answers, which you will have a 30-second right of reply to. Mahesh, National want to implement failed military boot camps as a solution to crime. Does National have any credibility in Auckland Central on crime when National were the ones who closed the downtown Auckland police station? Your time starts now.
Look, it's been 6 years, and they could have put a police station on 4th Street if they wanted to. It's terrible. I've spoken to 100+ businesses. I've spoken to numerous people, gangs threatening people in lifts, employers struggling to come into work because they're scared. The city is rife with crime. We're going to do 3 main things. Make sure that police have the tools to push back on gangs, make sure that there are right fit convictions so that there are consequences to people's actions, and make sure that youth crime is addressed with a military-style academy. This will ensure that people are set aside, and right form of support services will provide youth a better space to grow and make sure that positive relationships occur. From a long-term perspective, we need to invest in education, and that is exactly what we'll do. And our social investment fund will make sure that we commit funds to community organizations so there's targeted, focused relief to make sure that behavior that kicks off crime is reduced.
Follow-up question. Your coalition partner ACT wants to fine truant students, yet a TVNZ expose highlighted how many truant students are actually working 25 hours a week. How will fining teenagers skipping school for work be anything other than a penalty for being in poverty? Your time starts now.
Is that a question for him?
More statements.
I think it's more.
There's no question behind it. He's just venting randomly.
Pretty much. But you still have 50 seconds.
You don't need to answer that.
2 ticks blue.
What you do need to.
Damien saving the right already. Okay, let's see him.
What you do need to answer, sir, is what is your party going to do? Because the reason why people are committing ram raids, there's fundamental underlying drivers behind that. What are you going to do? And give me something concrete. That's I'm all down with the stopping of the ram raids in the prisons and the dawn executions. I'm all down for that. But what I want to hear about is what are you going to do to stop those 12 and 13-year-olds ending on that track in the first place?
You see, the key difference between National Act and Labour and Greens is one believes in centralisation, while the other believes in decentralisation, right? So our social investment program will have targeted, identified community organisations that work with underprivileged and communities that are struggling and make sure that they set up for success. Let me give you an example. There is an Indian community that provides incredible math literacy amongst their youth. I was speaking to them the other day, and I asked them, would they be open to setting up an agency which addresses math literacy for underprivileged kids? Setting up an organization. So let's get that working so that we can improve the education results for communities that are struggling. Let's set up these community organizations.
So welfare.
So this is private sector and community organization, not centralized government organizations, trusting community organizations, private sector to be part of the solution. We do this together. We do this as a community.
Thank you, Mahesh. Oscar, Labour's drive to lower the prison population is admirable because with almost 60% recidivism rates, nothing says you are more likely to go to prison again more than being in prison in the first place.
Hey.
But clearly, the means to monitor the huge jump in home detention has not been met with proper monitoring of prisoners on home detention or updating ankle bracelet technology. So we have a situation where heinous crimes are being committed because prisoners can just wrap tinfoil around their bracelets to confuse the system. Is this another example of a big plan by Labour with none of the proper funded oversight? Your time starts now.
It was microphone. It was Bill English, who I believe was the leader of the National Party, who said prisons are a moral and fiscal failure.
Amen.
We still have prisons. Look, I think it is telling. I think it is telling this evening that Mahesh, all he can talk about is the rewarmed policies of the last national government, which did not work. You look at those military-style boot camps. 83% of those offenders re-offended. Yeah. All you are doing is you are giving military training to ram raiders so that they can drive down Queen Street with military boot camp training. Yep. It is not an effective solution to crime. Let's compare our records. I live in Fort Street. I live next to Fort Street. I have seen the issues with law and order that we've had in this community. I have been a voice to make sure that we fix them as part of the city centre residents group. We've rolled out 1,800 new police, and we've funded the police. Unlike the National Party, we did not defund the police for 6 consecutive years while we were in government and shut down the Fort Street police station. Our record is effective action on crime.
I could not agree more. Follow-up question, Oscar. In 2016-2017, the 12-month recidivism rate was 46.8%, while the 24-month was 60.9%. The latest rates for 21-22 show these falling to 35.8% and 56.5% respectively. Labour's prison policy is bringing recidivism down, yet the angry electorate want revenge, not justice. Can Labour ever win the law and order debate when voters just want punishment and not rehabilitation? Your time starts now.
I think voters are smarter than that, Bomber. I think voters can see that what is important on crime is not just locking people away, is not just saying, you are not part of society anymore, we don't care about you. It's actually about tackling the root causes of crime. It's about being tough on crime, perhaps, but it's about being tough on the causes of crime and about saying we are actually going to fund these services adequately, not present a tax cut plan that does not add up with dodgy accounting, but actually that adds up, and that we can say we will not defund public services in order to score political points.
Damien?
Oscar, you say tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime, but if you're, I admire your courage. Let's compare our records. But if you have a look at what's happened in the last 6 years, it's very difficult to claim, isn't it, that Labour has been tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime, because both of those things have gone up. So what realistically are you going to do if you're granted another 3 years? Because the cultural reports, the early parole, the reduction in the prison muster, and the failure to address the underlying social issues that are causing people to go crime, both those things have gone wrong, or the metrics have moved badly in the last 6 years. What's Labour going to do differently in the future? And is that an admission that things haven't gone well in the past?
Well, I think there's a tension in your question there, Damien, right? Because you talk about the underlying causes of crime being social issues. And I agree with you on that. And I think that's why we have seen this increase in crime over the last few years. Because people, we are facing a tougher economic environment. That's been the reality post-COVID. I know people don't like it when we say that, but that has been the reality, is that we have had these circumstances that have existed across the world, across multiple different countries, and we had to deal with that, and that has meant an increase in crime. What we can't do is we can't go back to the failed policies of the past. We can't do things like ACT want to do, which is repealing the gun registry to put assault-style rifles in the hands of criminals.
To be fair, it's a bit rough to say that COVID let 3,000 prisoners out. I don't think that was COVID, to be fair.
Felix, I spoke to 2 small business owners over the weekend, Rog and Blade. Rog and Blade are meth cooks in Tamaki Makaurau. Small business owners.
Admirable
and they
profession.
are thrilled to death with ACT's breaking bad policy to allow pseudoephedrine to be sold over the counter so that they can leap into the lucrative domestic meth cooking market. Now, what Rog and Blade are worried about, however, is that another organised crime gang may step them out for their ice. So, they wanted to check with ACT tonight that you will remove the submachine gun ban so that they can buy submachine guns to protect their home-cooked meth that your pseudoephedrine policy will inadvertently fund. Can you assure Rog and Blade tonight, look down the barrel, that an ACT government will flood New Zealand with a sociopath submachine gun of choice so that they can protect their meth cooking? Your time starts now.
So what's their name, Roger and Blade?
Roger and Blade.
Like Roger and Blade, if ACT gets in government, you're going to prison because you committed too many crimes. That's the reality. We're tough on crime, we're going to say no more. So... And when it comes to pseudoephedrine, look, I think people deserve effective cold medicine, and I'm so happy to hear that we've got bipartisan support from Chloe on that. I think it's a really good medicine, and it definitely, affects if you got your cold. But I want to jump on this earlier discussion about crime because, the hard stats is violent crime has gone up by 38% since 2017 when Labour came into power. And no one here disagrees about the causes of crime. The causes of crime are social. It's housing. It's the fact that, people can't afford gas, they can't afford food, they've grown up in very traumatic upbringings. But at the end of the day, if we've got people who are victimizing people in the community, we've got people who are bashing people and breaking into shops, we need to do something about it. We need to make sure that there is a criminal justice response. And that's why the ACT Party has a really robust crime policy to fund police better, to fund prisons, to make sure that we actually got the settings in the Sentencing Act to send people to prison when they do commit serious, heinous crimes. Under this Labour government, we've seen crime go up. They tried to tell us it wasn't going up. It's kept going up, and that's why you've seen a huge surge in support for ACT National.
Follow-up question. Let me just get this crystal meth clear. ACT's crime solutions are more machine guns and more domestically produced meth. You want a registry for cough medicine, but not a registry for guns.
Cough medicine and gun are different things. So you've got to regulate them in different ways. You know, the problem with having a gun registry is what we've seen information from the gun registry repeatedly linked, and what we've seen gun violence go up and gun owners who hold those guns under the registry be put in danger because their information is being leaked. What we need to do is we need to devolve regulation of gun ownership to the community, because frankly, person-to-person regulation based on whether you can trust someone else, is a better form of regulation. It actually keeps guns out of the hands of gangs, and it keeps guns out of the hands of people they shouldn't have the guns.
I haven't heard more machine guns as a solution to crime, but Damien, you have a rebuttal based on Felix's answers, please.
Worked in Bassett Road. Why not? So I love the pseudoephedrine policy. I think codeine should also. I mean, these are great products, and the Greens are supporting this as well.
We support evidence-based drug law.
Oh, fantastic! So can we get? Because the question is, why does Blade and what's the other guy?
Rog.
Why does Blade and Rog have to go to prison? Because they are providing a service that consumers want. And if sir, you are from a Libertarian Party and you stand here and you tell Rog and Blade that they are going to prison for providing a service that your party is going to allow to become legal, how can you possibly justify such an appalling and regressive policy?
10 minutes in and Damien's gone crazy. Great. Okay. That's a new record.
You know, as any good libertarian, you've always got to have respect for the rule of law, and the law right now is that it's illegal to do that. And so, they should go to prison. I mean, meth is a huge problem in our communities. It absolutely destroys people's lives. It creates violence. It funds gangs. And to the extent that that's a problem, then we do need to deal with it in the criminal justice sphere.
You, sir, are not a Libertarian. Your membership of the Libertarian Party will be cancelled. I'm sorry.
Chloe, ram raids and gang turf wars generate enormous attention. But if we look at the stats, we see a very different reality of crime for the vast majority of Kiwis. In 2022, there were 886 ram raids, 57 murders, and there were 175,573 domestic violence investigations. Ram raids and murders are terrible crimes, but their numbers pale into insignificance when you look at domestic violence in New Zealand. We are very selective when we discuss crime this election, aren't we?
Far out. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think it is firstly really important to acknowledge the fact that people are scared. And as you've just said in your question, that does have a large part, or a large reason for that is because of the focus that we have put on what has been occurring. But I also want to acknowledge, having spoken to people who have been victims and survivors of crime, that they also need to have genuine solutions put forward. So I actually think that the greatest disservice that we could do to any of those who have been through crime is to say that we are going to put forward solutions that we know demonstrably do not work. And I think that that's why it's really important that as politicians and as ostensible community leaders that we are upfront about what the evidence actually says when it comes to solving these problems. So to your point around domestic violence, you'll know that we have had Martyn Davidson in the role of the Minister responsible for ending domestic and sexual violence for the last 3 years. She has led a strategy for the next 30 years called Te Aurere Kura, which is about bringing together all of the community leaders in this space to think about how we address the intergenerational drivers of domestic and sexual violence. But it is going to require substantive funding in those social drivers, which all of us have just agreed are the social drivers of these issues in the first place.
Follow-up question. The average age of these ram raid perpetrators mean that they were the children of John Key's state housing meth evictions and were the children living in cars. Our disconnect between the environment these children are raised in and our refusal to do anything meaningful on child poverty means a never-ending river of broken boys and girls who damage society, and the only solution being boot camps that don't work in more prisons. Thoughts?
I have to say that these are not crimes of young people who have a sense of hope for the future or who are thinking about what comes next. They're not crimes of people who are sitting down and reading the Crimes Act 1965 and thinking about what they're going to be punished with. So we know, looking at Police National Headquarters data from last year, that of the most egregious youth offenders and ram raiders in the country, that 95% of those were subject to family harm call-outs in the past 6 months. So it is actually precisely connected to that point around ending intergenerational domestic and sexual violence, which is going to require us putting a ton of money into solving those social drivers, into solving poverty. We know that we have enough to go around in this country because we have the greatest rates of wealth inequality on record, and we have confronted these challenges in the past in the 1930s with the social and economic transformation that was paid for by those who had profited handsomely during a time of hardship for many. We've done it before and we can do it again.
Amen. Damien, your rebuttal based on Chloe's answers, please.
Wouldn't it be more accurate to say that the 1930 social welfare reforms, or the institution of social welfare, we are now in generation 5, 6 of that, and an alternative narrative would be the reasons why we have these issues is that we have children of welfare having their own children, and we have the grandchildren of welfare. And so we have poured tens of billions of dollars into our intergenerational welfare state. And the end result is you have Orangi Tamariki having to take children off children. It is a system that has utterly failed. So how can the answer to a problem that appears to be, from my uneducated mind, appears to be the result of welfare, how can the answer be more welfare?
Well, Damien, I'm really glad that you raised that, because what we're dealing with is not the consequences of the 1930s and 40s. What we're dealing with right now is the consequences of the economic reforms that were undertaken in the 80s and 90s, the mother of all budgets, for example, because that has delivered the austerity, the underfunding of our public healthcare, our public education and our public housing, which has resulted in us having some of the most unaffordable housing by virtue of pretty much any metric that you want to use. So, no, we are not living in the consequences of a social welfare state. We are living with the consequences of austerity and the forebears of the ACT Party.
How can we? No. It's a fair response.
So well done.
But in response to that, so you throw the term austerity, right? So since the 80s, almost every government, except very small a number of very small number of cases, have been running deficits. So if the state is spending $100 and raising $90 in tax, which we have been doing since way back before Muldoon, how can you possibly argue that this is the result of austerity?
No, if the question is, why is it that we currently have the inequality, the poverty, the intergenerational inequity, the violence, the criminality that we all agree is driven by all of those other issues that I just spoke about, then we have to look at the circumstances that produce those in the first place. And the deregulation and privatisation of public sectors is demonstrably and evidentially responsible for that.
Demonstrably. Let's move on to issue 2.
Oh, selling off state houses does exactly that. In 1987, we had the disestablishment of the Housing Commission, which in its final report recommended against selling off state housing and implementing the accommodation supplement. But what we ended up doing was selling off state housing and implementing the accommodation supplement, which we now pay out to the tune of $2 billion a year to bid up private housing, which in turn only lines the pocket of landlords, but does absolutely nothing to address the issues of poverty.
Amen. Let's move on to issue 2.
I love the accommodation.
Let's move on to issue 2. 32% of households in Auckland Central have no car, which highlights the importance of public transport to this electorate. With traffic emissions being some of our highest polluters after agriculture, the need to build public transport capacity into our existing road network is crucial, yet the right keep crying about potholes when it was cutbacks under John Key's National Party that saw massive reductions in road maintenance budgets. Car drivers hate cyclists, cyclists hate car drivers, and public public transport users hate Auckland transport. Candidates, you have 60 seconds to answer each of my questions, followed by a question from Damien based on your answers, which you have a 30-second right to reply to. Oscar, the light rail fiasco, bike lanes over the fucking harbour bridge that never happened, and a second harbour crossing that no one in this room believes will ever get built. Is it Labour's incompetence and inability to get anything significant completed that has seen voters lose their faith in Labour to do anything meaningful on public transport?
It's hard to build infrastructure, but...
No, Stephen Joyce did it. Have a chat with Stephen.
He built roads. He built regional roads, and this is the problem. They have nothing to offer you. All they're doing is they're saying we're going to do roads of national significance too. They're going to do RONs too, and they're going to build regional motorway projects in places that aren't Auckland, and they are not going to fix the core problem in Auckland, which was we do not have a connected urban public transport network. And for people in Auckland Central, that's a disaster. For people like me who don't own a car and can't get around otherwise, that's a shambles. That's a mess. But let me talk about our record, because actually it isn't just light rail. It's things like completing the Northern Busway extension. It's things like the extensive work we've done on the Eastern Busway, and it's starting the Northwestern Busway. We are building a connected public transit network in Auckland, and I'm very proud of that. Yes, we've had setbacks with things like light rail, and we've owned up to that, and we've said there's more work to do there. That is the reality when you have a pandemic, when you can't get people into the country to build these things. That is what happens.
Follow-up question. We know transport takes up a quarter of the weekly wage of the poorest Kiwis, and we know benefit increases are clawed back by the evil winds. So free public transport was a real way to put real money back into the pockets of the poorest immediately. Why is it only half-price public transport for young people when it should be free public transport for all? How can Labour have found one great public policy idea like free public transport only to fuck it up again?
So there's two things. There's two things here, Bomber. The first is that this does address significant inequalities. So you look at what we had previously, which was that tertiary students were the only ones who got discounted public transport. What we've said is that the people who don't choose to go to tertiary education, young people who are in the trades or in these other industries, they also deserve access to discounted transport. So that's the first part on inequality. The second part is also just that reliability is key to public transportation. And so part of our money needs to go into funding more reliable services, which is what we've done. We've put millions of dollars into Auckland Transport's budget, specifically earmarked to make sure that services are as reliable as they were before COVID. Because that was the big issue if you're a public transport user like me, is that the bus wouldn't show up. That is fixed. That is being fixed because we've hired more bus drivers and we're paying them better, and that has increased the reliability of services.
Damien?
But Oscar, the buses are empty.
No, they're not.
I mean, I see them as.
Do you take the bus, Damien?
I see. Why would I catch a bus? Why on earth would I do that?
So
no.
how do you know?
So because
how do you know?
When I am driving down, when I am sitting in the motorway at 9:30 in the morning, I can see the buses going down the bus lane, and an awful large number of them are empty. But
it's nonsense.
Is there a question
to
this, or just
full.
hating buses?
They're so full that people aren't able to get on them. It's the problem.
Oscar, the issue is, be serious for a moment. Under the previous administration, roads were built, infrastructure was done, and whether you agree with where those roads were built, I mean, we have the road out to the airport, we've got Transmission Gully. Stephen Joyce built things in a way that his successors did not. So, is that going to change? Would you reinstate the roads of national significance, or are you still, because the only real success you're going to have with your current road strategy is you may well get to your zero fatalities because you can't drive anywhere.
We've completed motorway projects, and we're not saying that we're not ever building any more motorways again. We have committed to roading projects. But what we're also saying is that we need a connected urban transport network in Auckland. This is the economic heart of the city. This is the beating heart of the New Zealand economy. And if people can't get around it, if we don't have a serious grown-up public transport network like they do everywhere else in the world, then we're a joke. We're a silly country. Go to Melbourne. Go to Sydney. We have to build these things.
New Zealanders are.
Felix, ACT wants roads, 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 roads. Roads, 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 roads with a privatisation agenda that revolves around road tolls. Seeing as Transmission Gully was a public-private partnership that blew out costs, surely the solution is our own Ministry of Works rather than more corporations gaining limitless corporate welfare.
The problem in New Zealand is we've got this huge infrastructure deficit, right? Roads around the country are falling apart, they're overused, and drivers are demanding more roads because they need the roads to work in order for us to be a productive country. And so to some extent the problem is always one of investment, right? We have a limited amount of money in this country. We only have so much money that we can tax. If the pre-fu is anything to go by, there's not that money left. And so how do we get the money to build more roads in this country? Well, there's a couple of ways that ACT has recommended. We need to introduce road tolls so that we can actually raise that capital from people using the roads. We need to introduce private-public partnerships because, to be honest, if private companies overseas, or pension funds overseas, are willing to give us money to build roads in our country, I think actually that's a very good idea. And finally, when it comes to roads in our cities, we do need to charge people if they're congesting roads. Like if you're using Simon Street at peak time in the morning, then you should pay for that privilege to some extent. And that way we clear up our roads for public transport. But we also say to people who want to use cars, you've got to pay for that. And we think that's a fair policy. At the end of the day, ACT says that the user should pay. And that's a principle which we create our policy by.
Follow-up question, does ACT want to privatise the roads?
I don't care if they're private or public. I care that we have roads that work.
So that's a yes?
If privatising roads means that we get more roads with less potholes in and people driving the roads are willing to pay for them, I think that's a perfectly good idea.
Damien Grant's very happy. He's been so excited. He's been waiting for the privatisation of roads for such a long time. Why did the Libertarian cross the road? What road? Go for it.
When the Libertarian did cross the road, he paid the toll.
True.
It's the important distinction. Look, those are fighting words, and I applaud them. Will ACT support unfettered foreign direct investment to build these massive infrastructure roads that is going to connect everything from Rotorua to Raglan with great big 4-lane highways on either side and McDonald's and BP stations all the way down? I mean, it makes my heart sing. Yeah. But can we make sure that BlackRock and other big foreign investors are going to fund this stuff? Because we can't get it all from Gareth Morgan.
I appreciate your vision, but at the end of the day, you do need practical limits on foreign investment and foreign capital coming into this country. You do need to consult with communities. You do need to make sure projects are improved. So we can't let companies go full bore. But I think at the end of the day, if people are willing to put the money up, if drivers are demanding it, if they're willing to pay for it, and if private companies are willing to build it, we should use it. The fundamental problem in this country is if you believe, like any sensible politician, that we only have a limited amount of money to spend and we can't just turn on the infinite money machine to build us more roads, then the money needs to come from somewhere. And we think if private companies are willing to do it, that's a great idea.
Thank you, Felix. Chloe, the trucking industry who damage our roads causing the potholes are best mates with National. Why do their interests get served above public transport users in this country?
Well, a lot of people in this electorate do use public transport. As you just heard, a third of us don't own a car. So, and that is disproportionately those who live within the city centre, which is 45,000 people within the motorway boundaries. So, the first thing that I would say is that if you continue solely to focus on how you get more vehicles around as your starting point, then you are always going to build more roads. Whereas if you start from the position of how we're going to get more freight around and how we're going to get people around, then you start to think about rail and you start to think about walking, cycling and building better. So, I can't begin to draw the thread between what you're talking about with regard to the National Party's donations and the policies that might be coming out of them. But what I can say is that the Green Party have a very clear vision for how we reduce our carbon emissions in this city. We know that the story of New Zealand's emissions is that half of them are agricultural, whereas in Tamaki Makaurau and actually in all of our Tier 1 council areas, those emissions are half transport. Yeah. And the only way that we can go about reducing those emissions in a cost-effective manner is reallocation of road space.
Follow-up question. National intend to slash public transport investment while allowing their corporate farmer mates another 5 years to do fucking nothing on agricultural
I don't think that's true.
If a National Act New Zealand First Alliance of Arseholes government won't reduce transport emissions or agricultural emissions, how will New Zealand fight climate change?
Well, we're going to really struggle to do so, and I think that this is exactly what was evidenced through the process of the Zero Carbon Act, which gave us the emissions budgets and the emissions reductions plans, which is a whole of economy process for us to look at industry by industry, sector by sector, how we reduce emissions. If you are not going to tackle them in the area of transport, then we're putting more pressure on agriculture. If we're not going to tackle them in the area of agriculture, you're putting pressure back on transport. And if you're not going to do both of those things, you're kidding yourself. So we have to be honest about the challenges that we're facing and the limitations of physics. You cannot negotiate with physics or with chemistry, which is the basis of the climate changing.
Amen. Damien, your rebuttal, please.
I'd love to talk about, actually, the coal imports, because we have the lowest amount of coal imports that we've had in 32 years.
Thank you. Amen. Damien?
The issue is, from the roads and the trucks and the farmers deliver food, and they deliver food not just to overwhelmed middle-class people like me, but to your constituents. Some of them are not living great economic lives. So by implementing these policies, aren't you making it harder for the people who are on the margins and who are poor? And I would suspect that a lot of those people who are doing it tough actually aren't living in your electorate. They are living in South Auckland and other areas. And so aren't we seeing a situation where environmentalists are supporting policies that make them feel good, where the real price of those policies is being felt by the poor?
Thanks for raising this, Damien, because this goes to the core of why the Greens fundamentally believe that we have to have an economic system that supports both people and the planet, something which folks of the right also tend to critique us for. The fact that we recognise inherently, as the Independent Climate Change Commission has put it, that the emissions trading scheme is not a social tool. It is a market mechanism for us to be able to put a price on carbon to reduce carbon emissions through that market mechanism, but that we need to have social policies to deal with the inequity that may potentially be produced as a result. That's why the Greens have said that this election we can have an income guarantee for all New Zealanders. We can end poverty if we are to tax wealth.
Are you saying... I missed that. That's not a universal basic income, though.
It's a guaranteed minimum income.
And where does that kick in? Sorry, I missed that.
At $385 guaranteed for every New Zealander over the age of 18.
Per week, $385. Hear that, Bomber? That doubles your income, man.
Mahesh, National will mutilate public transport so that they can fund tax cuts for rich landlords. Why should Auckland Central voters, who are so dependent on public transport, vote for a party determined to kill off half-price fares for all young people?
So all jokes aside, we have Auckland Council is $100 million in debt. New Zealand is $100 billion in debt. New Zealand is a small, powerful country. We're agile, we can make decisions fast, we can make changes fast, but we are fragile. When we get hit, we take a hit. Resilience is critical for us. Economic resilience is really important. So we need to make sure our books are going well. We need to just deliver the City Rail Link really well for Auckland City so that Auckland City can start moving again. We are
What
going
if
to
I
make
want to
sure
go
that
somewhere
the Northwestern
not West
Motorway
Auckland?
is set up to Auckland to City Rail Link, and the Eastern Bus Pathway is set up to City Rail Link. We need to make sure that that's done well first. In the meantime, we should invest into roads that connect appropriately into regions, and then progressively step forward into a larger transport system.
Follow-up question. Simeon Brown was championing intercity buses as a better solution than the regional train plan, and it turns out that intercity buses are donors of the National Party. Who is public transport supposed to serve under a National Party? The public or National Party donors?
The public?
Okay. You might want to talk. You might want to talk to National. Damien.
I don't think that wasn't really a question, so I was fine with that answer. Move on.
Let's move on to issue 3. Housing and cost of living are issues important to Auckland Central voters. 55% of Auckland Central voters were born overseas. That's the highest in New Zealand. Has the highest proportion of New Zealand residents aged 25 to 34, 39% home ownership, and 25% have no heating. Cost of living and housing are incredibly important issues to this young electorate. Felix, ACT wants to slash public ministries and slash red tape and slash public servants and slash until there is a tiny state unable to do anything. How will amputating public services help New Zealand's cost of living crisis?
Look, a big contributor to our current cost of living crisis has been the government's wasteful spending. It's pushed up inflation. It's made it difficult for New Zealanders to afford food, to afford gas, to afford their rent. And so a big reason why we need to slash that public spending is so that we can get inflation down, so we can get the government doing its core services again. Again, ACT would make no cuts to things like health, to things like education, to things like police, those core public services that Kiwis still rely on. But I just want to touch on one other thing. The biggest problem for New Zealanders in terms of a cost of living crisis is the cost of paying rent, it's affording a home. And so that's why ACT has a really good plan to build more houses, to give GST from building new houses to council so they can actually build the infrastructure to get on top of that issue. For too long, housing has been unaffordable. Labour came to government in 2017 on a promise that they would provide that affordable housing. It's not been provided. People are still struggling. We need to change a government, and we need real change in the change of government.
Follow-up question. ACT's housing policy is to dump all RMA regulations and allow an urban sprawl that will make Hamilton the new southern suburb of Manukau. ACT claims insurance will cover any regulatory failures, but wouldn't that just send insurance rates through the roof, making housing even more unaffordable?
Yeah, to correct you, the policy is an option between insurance or council regulation, so you can pick either one. But more generally, the biggest blockage on housing in New Zealand right now is infrastructure. Regardless of the fact if you zone all of Auckland for 3 stories like Labour and National agreed to do, then the problem is still that you don't have the infrastructure to actually build those developments. And that's why the ACT Party says, like many have recommended, we need to share GST with councils. We need to provide councils more funding so they can actually get that infrastructure in the ground. And if we get that infrastructure in the ground, then we can build more houses. But yes, we also want to make big changes to the way we do housing regulation in this country. We want to replace the RMA with an Urban Development Act to make sure that we actually get that zoning that's required, because in some areas we do need to increase zoning to make sure that we provide affordable houses to New Zealanders.
It's not an Epsom.
The law applies to Epsom as well. The law applies to Epsom as well. You know, areas of that will be upzoned if people agree.
Oscar, it's a heritage area.
Damien,
leave it alone. No, I can't. I can't afford to live in Epsom. Crap some money. How many of these 14,000 additional public servants are you going to let go on day one?
Look, it's a process. I'm not exactly down.
Come on.
Well, absolutely. You need to look at every case, and some ministries have gone wholesale because fundamentally they don't provide services that New Zealanders actually benefit. When
like
it comes
education?
to actually looking at the ministries themselves, you need to ask, well, what is the person doing? Is it actually providing a service to Kiwis? And if it's not, then actually I don't think we should pay $100,000 to some consultant to sit in an office in Wellington. The lanyard class have taken control of government, and they're taking it for all the money they can get.
How many of the 14,000 are going to go by the end of the first term?
I can't give a commitment to you, Damien. I know you probably think about that at night, and you'd like me to say all of them, but unfortunately I can't say. What I will say is that ACT will issue a variety of stop work notices on day one in order to save the government a whole lot of money.
Chloe, we are told we can't properly fund our public services and social infrastructure because we don't have enough taxes. There are 14 billionaires in New Zealand and 3,118 ultra-high net worth individuals with over $50 million each. Why not start by wealth taxing them, then moving on to the greedy banks, then the obscene property speculators, and then the climate change criminals, and make them pay their fair share before making workers pay more tax? Thoughts?
Well, the Green Party's policy for economic reform would see the 95% of income earners paying less tax, and we would pay for that with a wealth tax, and obviously changes as well to the trust tax rate, corporate tax rate, and otherwise. So this is a question of fairness and the kind of tax system and the kind of economy that we want to create. So we can have an economy where everybody has the opportunity and the means that they need to be able to participate, the opportunity to thrive if they want to, and what that means is making sure that there are no barriers barriers to the likes of education. We know, and actually I've been in a number of debates over the past few days where education has consistently been proffered as the pathway out of poverty. In fact, again, we know, based on the evidence, that the major barrier to getting a decent education is poverty. So we can address that by ensuring that no one lives in poverty in this country through redistributive policies.
Follow-up question. The richest 1%, the billionaire class and the real estate pimps, have donated $12 million to National and ACT, and we see both those parties' policies ensuring the rich are protected and looked after. Is the cost of living crisis and housing crisis a class war being waged on renters, working class people, the middle classes and beneficiaries this election?
Well, I think that you only need to look at who is consistently asked to carry the can through tough economic times, through unconventional monetary policy utilised throughout COVID-19 with large-scale asset purchases and other ways. We know full well, because Treasury and IRD gave advice to government which said that we would end up with distributional impacts, that is, greater inequality, and that the only way to meaningfully address that was through fiscal policy, i.e. tax and spend. This is exposing the fact that all of this inequality that we're presently dealing with is not just a market abstraction, it is a political decision.
Damien?
So I agree, monetary policy was terrible. So you're with me that Adrian Orr should go?
No, I'm not. But what I can say...
He was responsible for the greatest transfer of wealth from the asset owning class, from the non-asset owning class to the asset owning class.
Greatest
there
rise in
were
house prices.
billions and billions of dollars of people who were locked out of the housing market because of the manifest incompetence of that public servant. How can there be no accountability for that magnificent act of incompetence?
So what we have to do here is to understand the roles of monetary and fiscal policy. Monetary policy, obviously...
Damien doesn't understand it.
Well, no, I think he does to a certain extent, which is that monetary policy is the remit of RBNZ, and the main role that it tends to play is with the OCR, but obviously unconventional monetary policy, distributional impacts, etc., which we've just discussed. What we're talking about here is the role of government to do its fiscal policy fairly to reduce that inequality, and that is the political decision at the end of the day.
What about the government's changes to the Reserve Bank? They changed the dual mandate so they consider employment as well. That's part of the reason why they printed so much money.
No, it's not.
It's the government's role to legislate the Reserve Bank. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and
wants to fire Adrian Orr.
And again,
I think it's hard to argue that Adrian Orr didn't cause inflation. I think it's pretty ridiculous to try to do so.
Chloe's not arguing.
That's not what I'm saying. No, and ultimately what I am saying is that we had Adrian Orr in front of Finance and Expenditure Select Committee along with other members of the MPC, and what they made abundantly clear is that actually they would have made no decision in the alternate had they not had that dual mandate, because what they were primarily focused on was financial stability.
So what was the point of the dual mandate?
National is going to give rich landlords a $250 per fortnight tax cut funded by robbing 2-year-olds, mutilating public transport, and literally robbing the climate change funds. Why should poor people fund tax cuts for rich people?
You know, one of the biggest challenges over the last 6 years has been this government and this Labour Green group separating people and putting them in opposing sides. Landlords versus renters, rich versus poor, Māori versus non-Māori. These sort of segmentation and charting one group and another does not work. We are part of one intricate, elaborate economic system, and we can play a non-zero-sum game. Our biggest issue with housing is supply. So there's a whole range of things we need to do that. The National Party will build the rent-to-build industry all over again. We're going to make sure that landlords come back into the market with quantity and quality by taking away introducing interest deductibility again and changing the bright line test. We're going to make sure that we work with private sector to build more by changing the rural-urban line, extending that with a third tier of the agriculture land, which commissions have come out and said that it's okay to build, we can build there. We will carry on intensification around the traffic networks, and we will add and create competition to social housing. Kaingora is not doing its job properly. We have to invest into community health housing projects so that we can deliver more quantity and quality. This is a whole raft of things we are doing in regards to the number one issue in housing in New Zealand. We gotta build, baby, build.
follow-up question. Your tax cut is premised on raising $20 billion in revenue from taxing foreign house speculators when almost every independent economist calls your numbers nonsense. Let's say you do make that many sales. Won't National simply be pricing the next generation out of home ownership if it does succeed?
We have showed our model, we've talked through it, and we will release our financial numbers even more before the election date. Having said this, the significant tax income that we are going to generate will go a long way in regards to addressing our debt. And I like how you said almost all economists, when all economists have stated that the GST piece that Labour and Greens want to pull through is a complete no-no.
Yeah, I'm not sure taking GST or fresh fruit and vegetables equates to needing to find $20 billion. But Damien, your counter, please.
National failed to get rid of or reform the RMA last time. Why should we trust you the next time?
We have to do it. We have to do it. It is definitely a roadblock. It definitely is a roadblock in regards to it.
You didn't sell any assets last
we
time.
are committed to doing it, and we will deliver on it.
We'll make sure they'll do it.
When we're talking about tax cuts, though, I mean, your tax cuts, you're not getting rid of the 39 cents in the dollar. It doesn't look like you're doing anything on the trust rate. Your tax cuts have been paid for not by cutting spending, but by raising more taxes. Are you actually committed to reducing the size of the state, or is your solution to the deficit just to continue to smash the middle classes with ever more rising taxes?
I think you bring up a really good point, Damien. What's actually happening, ladies and gentlemen, over the last 6 years is there's been a strategic shift of power, attempt of power to move from consumers and businesses into government. And government has wasted that money. What this government, our future government is going to do is we're going to make a strategic shift of power back from government, back to consumers and businesses, communities to drive more. We're going to do that by cutting waste from government and by reducing the significant bloat that's happening in government.
Hey, Mahesh.
Thank you, Mahesh.
Can I ask a question? Mahesh, do you accept that with the current state of our tax system, that people are incentivised to invest money in land speculation and property?
Yes, and that's critical so that we can keep building. Would you like to keep building more houses?
No, that's not. No.
Would you like to keep building more houses as
you don't build houses by speculating.
I do not. We need to keep building houses. We currently have a property and a lot of wealth and assets, and a lot of families have grown with that culture. Over time, there's an opportunity to change that, but we need to identify other industries that people can invest into, and we haven't yet done that.
I think you fundamentally misunderstand the question or the tax
really
system.
Promoting and progressing the tech sector where we can invest more of our wealth into.
You're not answering the question. The question is about the fact that we are the only country in the OECD without any form of capital gains tax, stamp duty, inheritance tax, wealth tax, or otherwise, and that if you look at research out of the University of Auckland, it tells us that investment in the rental market does not make sense on rental yield alone, but solely on capital gains. The question is, do you believe that the current state of the tax settings in this country mean that people speculate on land? Because speculation is very different to building, my friend.
No. Let him answer. Let him answer. I want to hear the answer.
No, I think New Zealand's built up a strong culture in regards to wealth creation around property. I think this is something that we need to steadily wean our way away from, but this is a long-term project.
So you agree we need to wean away? We need to wean.
Right now, we have significant challenges in regards to our deficit, in regards to our debt levels. We need to make these changes progressively, step by step. If we do a slash and burn in regards to tax, it could cause significant seismic impact across our economy. We have to do this in a step-by-step fashion.
Oscar, Labour will build a further 6,000 state houses, while National have pledged to stop building them if they win power. National intend to throw unruly state tenants out onto the street. Where will those state tenants go? Isn't National's housing policy a recipe for homelessness?
I mean, I have no idea, to answer your question, Bomber. When they were in government, they sold 1,500, well, they delivered negative 1,500 state houses when they were in government. We've delivered the most of any government since the 1950s. That's in 70 years. 1 in 6. 1 in 6 of every state houses in New Zealand has been built under this government. Our record on housing is one that I am very, very proud of. We have been, and to Mahesh's point, we have been building. Consent levels under this government have been at record levels. You contrast that with John Quay saying, oh, there's no housing crisis, there's nothing to worry about. For someone like me and for the thousands of people in this electorate who rent, that's really concerning. It's really concerning when Nationals say that they're going to bring back no-cause evictions so that people who live in the apartment buildings around this area can just be kicked out of their houses for no good reason. That suggests to me that they don't actually care about solving the scale of the housing crisis. You listen to Mahesh's answer. He's just like, let's keep the merry-go-round going. Let's keep the grift going. We actually need to solve this problem, and that means investing in housing supply and actually building new homes, which we have done under this government. Record consents. Record consents.
Follow-up question. GST off my banana don't mean jack. We face the worst food inflation in 30 years, and Labour's weak, incremental, pitiful and spineless response is part of the problem. When will Labour do something meaningful on the cost of living after the election when you couldn't do jack with an unprecedented MMP majority? Was Chippy's captain's call on ruling out the wealth tax an enormous political mistake? Your time starts now.
Stop talking about the wealth tax.
No, I mean, like, we're not doing wealth tax, right? And that's the right call. Like, it's not the right time for it. There isn't the public support for it. That's why the Green Party is polling at 11%.
All right,
But let me answer your question about the supermarkets, Bomber. Let me answer your question about the supermarkets. We have appointed the first ever grocery commissioner, and we have given them legal powers to take on the grocery industry. We have had a duopoly in this country for decades that have reamed ordinary New Zealanders when they check out at the supermarket. When people go and check out, these companies can charge whatever they want because they have a duopoly, because they have never been exposed to competition. And we've said it's time for that to change. We're going to appoint someone whose sole job it is to fix that and make sure that people get a better deal at the supermarket.
Damien, your rebuttal, please.
How much do you recall how much the Commerce Commission said that the duopoly was taking out in excess profits?
It's $1 million a day, I believe.
Yep, $400 million. That was the theory. When you consider how well the Labour government has done on all of its other projects, how confident are you that by attempting to regulate the supermarkets, all you're going to do is take that 400 to 800 to $1 billion? I mean, if you look what you did on the property market, the opportunity for supernormal profits in the supermarket realm are enormous, aren't they?
So, I mean, we'll talk about the property market first. I mean, you look at the success of, firstly, the state home building program that we've had, but also the fact that rents in Auckland have stabilised. Rents in Auckland have stabilised because we did planning reform. That didn't happen in Wellington. We have a natural experiment to compare the two regimes. National want to bring back what we had previously, which is council discretion over these things, and they're already in the business press today. They're already in business desks saying, we've done it, we've solved the problem, we're not going to zone for any more housing, we're not going to build any more housing because, we don't need to under National's policy. So that's what we're returning to if they win an election, and that is going to be the problem with housing supply in this country. Sorry, what was the first part of your question? The supermarkets.
I think the answer is you would do as well with supermarkets as you did with Kiwi Build.
I don't think so. We're giving this grocery commissioner severe legal powers. This is millions of dollars in fines that can be levied against these organisations to deal with the problem. But contrast that with them. They have no plan to deal with this problem. They have no plan to deal with the duopoly.
Costco.
Thank you,
They
Oscar.
came in under a Labour government.
Thank you, Oscar. Damien, you have a personal question for
Can we
Chloe?
just, no, let's just not call it just a question. I voted for you for mayor. Sorry. No, I don't want to. Don't tell me what to do. I voted for you for mayor on your helmet policy. Do you remember that? Whatever happened to that spark of libertarianism that was there? Where did it go, Chloe, and how can we get it back?
I still fundamentally believe in that point that I put forward in the 2016 local government campaign. So for those who didn't follow it very closely, what this was looking at the data which showed that subsequent to 1993, when we put the mandatory helmet law in place, it's only us in Australia, by the way, that have this. What we saw was a massive decrease in the amount of investment in cycling infrastructure, but also, and a decrease in the amount of people who were cycling, but an increase in the amount of injuries associated to cycling. And the only kind of rational conclusion that you can draw from that is that we were seeing personal responsibility being used to abdicate political responsibility to build cycle lanes and other protected infrastructure. So yes, sure, there are some levels of overlap with libertarian policy, but it's basically just about how we build the requisite infrastructure.
Come all the way. You said, I think it was yesterday, you accused a couple of ACT Party MPs of race baiting. You said Chris Bailey, I think, and Simon Court. You said you were going to come back with examples. Do you have some examples for us?
Yeah, so Simon Court in the House was going on a tirade, and people can go and look this up on Hansard, about the fact that Three Waters reform was going to result in basically searching for tanifas in rivers, and that was going to mean that, Māori were going to prevent infrastructure being built. You have Chris Bailey multiple times on record invoking Te Ao Māori and doing so in quite a nefarious way, such that I have sought to want to actually stand up in the House and table whether we are seeing dog whistles being put forward. But I mean, if you're to look at the track record of what even David has done in the last 3 years, we've got the releasing of the Māori Code to access vaccines. We've got the ostensible joke around the Ministry of Pacific Peoples. There's plentiful examples out there.
The allegation of racism or race baiting is an inherently nasty one. I took Simon Wilson to task on this the other day. Isn't it dangerous to accuse somebody like David Seymour and Simon Court and Chris Bailey of race baiting? Don't you have to be really sure that their intentions are in fact malign before you make that allegation?
Well, I think you only need to look at some of the people who have aligned their support with the likes of what they've been putting forward, Damien, and it's pretty clear there that the dog whistles are pretty overt.
Okay. Damien, do you have any other questions for anyone else, or is it just Chlöe?
No, I do have to say on this, if you are going to position yourself as somebody who is not race baiting, then you need to be really, really clear when people who are overt racists come out of the woodwork to support you, that they do not stand with you, because otherwise what you're doing is dog whistling.
Well, that would make a coalition with the Māori Party difficult. All right, Oscar.
Do I not get a response?
No. What the hell? All right, Oscar. According to your LinkedIn profile, I've been stalking you on LinkedIn. All right, just to be clear, you work for a software company for anti-money laundering.
That's correct. Oh, yes. I know that one of those questions can be down. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
yes, I do, Damien, yes.
So, how evil?
A year ago.
How evil is the anti-money laundering policy, and what should we be doing to remove it?
Look, I don't agree with your libertarian pro-crime approach when it comes to the anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism Act. The AML-CFT Act is quite important when it comes to combating financial crime. You look at the cowboy cryptocurrency operators that are ripping off ordinary people. You look at the drug financing that happens in this country. The AML-CFT Act is really important for that. You look at just terrorist financing. I mean, it's the counter-financing of terrorists act. I'm proud to be anti-terrorism, Damien.
Because I got to tell you, I encounter AML and I have to go down and get this paperwork. And if you think Al Qaeda can't overcome that paperwork, but anyway, never mind. Mahesh, Friedrich Hayek. What is your favourite Hayek book? You've had like a year to get this answer, sir. What is your answer?
Oh, come on. We can't do this again. Last time Damien met me, he cornered me and asked me, hey, which Hayek's your favorite? And it's the first time I met him, and I went, I don't know which Hayek. And then he went around saying, a senior National Party official doesn't know which Hayek is
well,
the
which one is your favorite?
It's Friedrich Hayek. Thank you very much. I feel Friedrich Hayek.
And what's your favorite Hayek book?
I don't recall. I am not a Hayek geek, Damien. I apologize. Found me caught.
You have had a year. Felix, you nervous?
No.
You should be. You are a lawyer, you're studying law. Where are you at in your legal profession?
Yeah, so I am a law clerk. I work at a community law centre down in Manukau, and I'm just finishing Profs Now, which is like the course you do to become a lawyer.
No, I'm familiar. See, it's another regulated profession. So give me your quick working interpretation of Mainzeal.
Pardon?
Mainzeal.
Mainzeal?
Yeah.
Oh, the case.
Yeah, the case. Give me a hot take, man.
I to be honest, I'm more focused on criminal and family law than corporate law, so I wouldn't know anything about Mainzeal, unfortunately. You're asking the wrong person.
I should have known you before you were born. Okay, all right.
That was such a poorly researched part of the show, wasn't it? Like, we went to Damien for 4 questions and they were all dreadful. Thank you, candidates. We must now wrap with our final word on the direction of New Zealand. In the polling, 62% of Auckland Central voters believe the country is moving in the wrong direction. We have 25,000 people on the social housing wait list. We spend $1 million a day keeping people and beneficiaries in unsafe motels. We have massive truancy problems in our schools. 12% of children in New Zealand live in low-income households. 55% of Kiwis are struggling financially. Home ownership is at its lowest rate in 70 years. We are facing the worst food inflation in 30 years. 100,000 Kiwis face homelessness, and the planet is melting. Candidates, you each have 60 seconds to answer where you think the country is going and how voting for you and your party will impact that direction. From the National Party, Mahesh, your time starts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure today. I know everybody wants to go home, so I'll keep this quick. Every time I door knock, the biggest thing I hear, the most common thing I hear is that we need a change. And to this election, you have an opportunity to go and shift power back to people and communities. Shift and trust in decentralization versus centralization. And with me, you will have a candidate that will fight for Auckland City and Auckland Central, a place that I love, that I spent close to a decade to. I live locally. A person who will fight to make sure crime is sorted and law and order will come through, that the cost of living crisis is addressed, that the City Rail Link project is delivered, that Auckland Transport is made to make sure that things work on time, and our housing issues are made front and center and resolved. With me, you will have someone who you will know that this is my life's work in representing you. So vote 2 ticks blue on October 14th. National Party, way to go. Come on.
Thank you, Mahesh. From the Labour Party, Oscar, your time starts now.
There is too much at stake this election to stay home. We need to keep building, and that means ensuring that our state housing program continues. That means keeping consents at record levels. That means not big tax giveaways to landlords and foreign investors. Look, the economy is not perfect at the moment, but New Zealand is growing faster than Australia. We are turning the corner. The economic recovery is about to begin, and I'm very optimistic about the future of this city and this country. We can't afford a government that will throw renters to the dogs. We can't afford a government that will cut public transport spending for people in Auckland Central and cut the infrastructure projects necessary to deliver that public transport. We can't afford a government. We can't deliver a National Party government in this country that has a dodgy tax plan that does not add up. That independent economists have said their figures are wrong, that they don't make sense, that they rely on foreign gambling revenue. For all of those things, party vote Labour on October 14th.
Thank you, Oscar. From ACT, Felix, take it away.
Yeah, sure. I've been talking to a lot of young people this election, and when I say, what are you thinking about? They're not thinking about what party to vote for, whether that's, Chlöe or Mahesh or Oscar. They're thinking about where they're going to go overseas next year. They're going to go and work in Australia. They're going to go work in Canada. They're going to go work in America. If we want to think about New Zealand's economic history, we need to think about productivity. When National came to power in 2008, the gap in the median wage between New Zealand and Australia was $10,000. Now it's $23,000. The median wage for Kiwis is $27 and the median wage in Australia is $37. That is why New Zealanders are doing it tough right now. In many ways, crime, cost of living, it all comes from a question of productivity. So the real thing, the real answer that we need to come to and answer is, how do we fix this productivity crisis? How do we make New Zealand a productive country? And the way we do that is we make it easier for two people to come together, to agree to do business, to employ each other, to build things, to build houses, to grow businesses. And if we can do all that, then we can actually make New Zealand the productive paradise it's meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Finally, from the Green Party, Chloe, your time starts now.
I'll let you in on a secret, and it's that if you leave politics to the politicians, we'll get what we've always got. Maybe you already knew that, Damien. And that's the problem, right? We have a system at the moment in our politics where we get the politics that we think that we deserve, and much like we get the love that we think we deserve, I've got to be honest with you, at a national level, I think the bar is far, far too low. Like Felix, watching the debate between the two Chris's the other day, feeling incredibly uninspired, but that does not represent our future. New Zealanders get to decide that, all 5 million of us, and we can decide to have a government that takes meaningful action on climate change and seriously addresses inequality, and we can decide to apply that at a local level, as we have been over the last 3 years, rising to every single challenge that has confronted us. I have strong faith and belief in our community because I've seen proof of concept with the things that we have achieved, and we have so much more work to do, and I'm looking forward to getting on with that work. 2-tick screen.
All right, just before we hand over to Bomber to wrap up, I would like to thank the 4 candidates, Chloe, Mahesh, Oscar and Felix. And I have to say, it is disturbing to see how young you all are. Well, most of you, I'm sorry, Mahesh. But it is also somewhat refreshing to see 4 people of real talent, even if you don't agree with their politics. It is excellent to see these individuals coming out. Thank you so much for supporting Bomber and I's little project. We are desperately sad and lonely, so anything like this that gives us an opportunity, we deeply appreciate it. So, and I think a round of applause for our candidates.
Comrades, that's the show. Thank you for tuning into this most important of civic duties, which is to vote. As I stated at the beginning, in an age of disinformation, misinformation and apathy, our democracy needs engaged citizens like never before. Our thanks to the candidates, Gravity Credit Management, the Daily Blog, the Working Group, the Taxpayers Union, Courier Polling, Slipstream Media and Juice TV Freeview 200 for bringing this evening's debate to the live stream masses. We will see you next Tuesday at 7 p.m. for our final electorate debate in Tamaki. Can Act Humiliate National? Let's find out next week. From the palatial Roxy's at Imperial House and the mighty Auckland Central. Kia ora and ka pai, New Zealand. You stay classy, Aotearoa. Good evening.
That was New Zealand's greatest weekly political podcast, The Working Group. Not 1 minute of this show was funded by New Zealand On Air. Nope, no creamy public broadcasting money for us. That was The Working Group.
And he's not even like wing.
So better. Just like Eden, one of the best we've had, right? Oh yeah, shit yeah. If she can't win based off an interview like that, I mean, Auckland Central's crazy. They should romp home after that. Oh, so Tamaki's our last one, eh? That's been fun.
How good was that?
I think we've
Whatever
just
it is,
reset the
it's all about money. That's Elon Musk kind of future.
This is the biggest snowball.
I said to Louis, shit, we think he might have thought this was a little bit
So he was like, fuck, we break everything.
Paul was on all this.
Oh, no, shut up the door.
Shut the door.
So these are the ones